embattled Congressman Matt Gaetz.
Matt Gaetz was one of the very few members in the entire Congress who bothered to stand up against permanent Washington on behalf of his constituents.
Matt Gaetz right now, he's a problem for the Democratic Party, and he can cause a lot of hiccups in passing of laws. So we're going to keep running those stories to keep hurting him.
If you stand for the flag and kneel in prayer, if you want to build America up and not burn her to the ground, then welcome, my fellow patriots. You are in the right place. This is the movement for you.
You ever watch this guy on television? It's like a machine. Matt Gaetz.
I'm a canceled man in some corners of the internet. Many days I'm a marked man in Congress, a wanted man by the deep state. They aren't really coming for me. They're coming for you. I'm just in the way. Welcome to the show. If you're listening on Apple, make sure you're subscribed. Also, make sure that you've got that 5-star rating or review coming in. Sure helps us get our content to more folks. And if you're enjoying on Rumble or YouTube, make sure you hit that little bell. Make sure your notifications are turned on. We have a full show today. Foreign consulates. That's where we start. Foreign consulates, well, they've been behaving badly in our country. Think of them as junior embassies, operation centers. Foreign nations maintain these consulates throughout America in population centers like New York, Miami, Chicago, LA. And the people who work at foreign consulates, they're not independent actors. They're not out doing their own thing. They are paid, tasked, and directed by a foreign power. They do their bidding, often receiving orders from secure cables. Now, we're told they do ministerial, helpful things, resolve visa issues, assist expatriates, facilitate commerce, and surely that stuff does happen. But harmless paperwork pushing is not the only thing going on at foreign consulates in America. There is a darker side: espionage, subversion, theft, recruitment, information warfare, and catastrophic terrorism. National Interest published a piece recently entitled "How China is Using Espionage to Dethrone the U.S." They shed light on what is really happening at consulates. Official cover is when an intelligence officer is assigned to an embassy or consulate under a diplomatic role, in addition to their diplomatic duties. These officers perform their intelligence duties during the day or at night, and they do enjoy diplomatic immunity if they are caught. Trump had to close a Chinese consulate in Houston. It was a hub of intellectual property theft. And where did one of the CCP spies run when busted stealing from our universities? China's consulate in San Francisco. Russia's consulate in Seattle was crawling with so many spies, President Trump had to shut it down and actually had to expel the personnel from America. Foreign consulates have a sinister side. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia deserves intense focus on this exact front. President Joe Biden recently ordered the declassification of documents evidencing Saudi Arabia's 9/11 connections. Though Biden did this under political pressure from 9/11 families who were going to exclude him from 9/11 ceremonies, we enthusiastically endorse this declassification. Now, we're going to learn a lot. Saudi Arabia's Los Angeles consulate was directly involved in assisting 2 9/11 hijackers. Housing, bank accounts, logistics, their American experience, coordinated and curated by Saudi government officials. Did I mention 15 of the 19 9/11 hijackers were Saudi? As you can see on this chart, Omar al-Bayoumi and Fahad al-Tumari are top dogs in this uncovered, Saudi Arabia-supported Los Angeles-based terror network. Let's start with al-Bayoumi. Omar al-Bayoumi is a Saudi intelligence agent. I'm sure he's bonesaw trained. Al-Bayoumi was the advance team for 2 of the 9/11 hijackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mindhar. They had nowhere to live, fresh from the desert, probably still had sand in between the pages of their Quran, and al-Bayoumi secured their housing. After meeting both of the terrorists at the Mediterranean Grill in 2000, al-Bayoumi finds them an apartment in San Diego. He even signed financial documents to secure that apartment and bank accounts. On the record, Bayoumi declares this a chance encounter. Now, I've had a lot of chance encounters in my life, and some of those I certainly regret. But chance encounters typically don't start with kebabs and hummus and end with opening bank accounts together or signing financial guarantees to lock in rent agreements. I won't even co-sign a rent agreement for most of my friends, much less a chance encounter at a terrorist hangout. We are supposed to believe that the Saudi government officials who opened bank accounts with 2 terrorists and secured housing for terrorists were somehow not involved when those very jihadists flew planes into buildings. Oh, and speaking of flying planes, a search of al-Bayomi's belongings revealed an aviation diagram that he produced for 2 of the 9/11 hijackers. The diagram models the exact aerial descent that Flight 77 took in pursuit to striking the Pentagon. And American Airlines Flight 77 is the exact same plane that al-Bayomi's terrorist contacts hijacked. What are the odds? Bayomi called the Saudi embassy in D.C. 30 times between January and March of 2000. His 2 hijacker buddies, they arrived in February. But we're supposed to believe that al-Bayomi wasn't taking orders from Riyadh. Please. The aforementioned Mediterranean Grill, which hosted this infamous chance encounter, is basically a terrorist Foursquare check-in, by the way. The FBI report mentions that one of the individuals affiliated with the grill worked as a facilitator for the armed Islamic group, the GIA, and is associated with the Salafist group for preaching and combat, that's the GAPC. Now, both of these groups evolved into Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. And of course, the Mediterranean Grill is linked to the Saudi consulate through Saudi official Fahad al-Tumari. Fahad al-Tumari is an accredited diplomat at the LA Saudi Arabia consulate, and he led an extremist faction as the imam of the King Fahd Mosque. In 1999, a 7-minute phone call occurred between al-Tumari and the Saudi Arabian family home phone of 2 of the brothers later detained in Guantanamo Bay. Together, al-Tumari and al-Bayomi provided English translation, employment, assistance in acquiring driver's licenses, locating flight lessons, and hijacker housing for the 9/11 attackers. Where did this motivation come from? Certainly it couldn't have involved the self-proclaimed close and critical ally for the United States in the fight against terrorism, Saudi Arabia, could it? See, one of the biggest discoveries that we've seen through these recently uncovered documents is that the Saudi government officials were working with the Saudi Ministry of Islamic Affairs at the Washington, D.C. embassy, and they were involved in giving directions to al-Tumari and Bayomi, and those were the individuals supporting the terrorist network. So you've got this guy, Al-Jarrah. He's a mid-level Saudi foreign ministry official and was assigned to the Saudi embassy in Washington, D.C. in 1999 and 2000. His duties included overseeing the activities of the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, and it was those employees that were participating at Saudi-funded mosques and Islamic centers within the United States. According to FBI sources who pushed back against the official Saudi covering narrative, Jarrah participated in numerous calls with al-Tumari and al-Bayomi in assistance to the hijackers Mindahar and Hazmi. It was believed that they may have discussed the very assistance that al-Bayomi and al-Tumari were in fact providing to these hijackers. And so now, the 9/11 families are suing the kingdom. And they'd be a lot further along in that litigation if the U.S. government would stop blocking access to the evidence that further details Saudi's involvement. Here's Jim Kreinler, attorney for the 9/11 families, on Tucker Carlson Tonight.
The last administrations and directors Mueller and Comey and President Obama fought against the families and maintained a cover-up to cover up the FBI's own intelligence failures. The FBI had identified the 2 lead hijackers in January of 2000 in the United States, was monitoring them and was monitoring the Saudi government officials that were helping them. The FBI, the intelligence community, lost them, and 9/11 occurred. This was an enormous embarrassment to the intelligence community and the Bureau, and they tried to hide the truth from the families. Moreover, President Obama tried to stop the families from even being able to sue Saudi Arabia and show to the world how officials in the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, and we've now identified 11 Saudi government officials, were the accomplices that provided the help al-Qaeda needed to mount the attacks. That was done by the last president to try and get Saudi Arabia not to oppose the Iran nuclear deal. So for 18 years, until this president, you've had presidents and FBI directors who stood with Saudi Arabia, and the families have had to fight not only Saudi Arabia with its trillions of dollars and enormous power, but our own FBI and the last president.
The United States of America should not be engaged in a cover-up for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The victims of the actions of the kingdom are American, and we should be on their side, exposing the truth and demanding accountability, financial accountability, and otherwise. In August, a letter sent to the White House and signed by 1,600 family members of the 9/11 victims called for the declassification of all remaining 9/11 documents, which will further link the Saudi Arabian government to the 9/11 attacks. This was followed by the introduction of the September 11th Transparency Act of 2021, which I am a proud co-sponsor of and fully support. This bill demanded declassification of the investigation documents concerning the foreign support for the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Now, this legislation hasn't been called up for a hearing. I wonder why. Joe Biden, he did take a very positive step, though. He ordered the declassification of more documents. And that tells us more of the story. In the FBI's mandated release of these documents, they are redacting a whole hell of a lot of names in 16 pages that we're now able to see, and those names should be revealed. The 9/11 families prosecuting litigation against Saudi Arabia, they deserve the truth. We all do. But if we rely on our intelligence agencies, we will never get to the bottom of it. Sadly, the United States intelligence agencies are complicit in the cover-up of Saudi Arabia's official assistance of the 9/11 hijackers. Special Agent Jackie McGuire was operating under now disgraced former FBI Director Bob Mueller. She had the nerve to tell Congress in 2004 that terrorist lunch meeting at the Mediterranean Grill was indeed a chance encounter.
Just to take a step back and start from the beginning, kind of run through a chronology of our interest in Fahad al-Thumairy. After September 11th, information was developed that the two hijackers had lived in San Diego. The name Omar al-Bayoumi came up in your staff statement. Our investigation has determined that al-Bayoumi had met the hijackers. All indications is that meeting was a random encounter. Met the hijackers.
You're talking about the meeting at lunch?
Yes, in a restaurant in Los Angeles on February 1st of 2000. After that, a few days later, they moved to San Diego, and al-Bayoumi assists them in getting an apartment at that time.
We know better now, but true to form, Congress ate up the FBI's lies, and the American people were once again shielded from the truth, the deep state at its finest. But as cover-ups go, this one came from the top echelons of the system. The hard-working FBI field agents who were investigating the case, well, they were met with constant pushback from FBI headquarters in Washington. The most political building in Washington, D.C. is the J. Edgar Hoover building. A New York Times Magazine article from January last year describes how one field officer, Daniel Gonzalez, he was in the San Diego office and was blocked in his investigation at every turn. During the last 15 years of his FBI career, Gonzalez was a central figure in the Bureau's effort to understand the Saudi connections to 9/11. But even on the inside, Gonzalez often felt as if our own government wanted no part of what he was finding. From the day of the attacks, the trail seemed to point to Saudi Arabia. But as the details of the 9/11 plot came into focus, the FBI line on possible Saudi involvement begins to shift. Low-level Saudi government officials with no ties to anyone important. Well, they may have helped some hijackers in California, but there's no indication that they knew that these men were terrorists, much less planning on murdering thousands of Americans. But according to current and former officials, requests for assistance that might have rattled the Saudi security agencies were frequently balanced against the FBI and the CIA's need for Saudi help abroad. So think about that. The desire for expeditionism abroad was so strong that it overwhelmed the pursuit of the truth at home. In reality, our relationship with Saudi Arabia goes much deeper than national security. Here's what I said about it on Tucker Carlson.
U.S. government. What's baffling to me is how there is resilient bipartisan support for maintaining this relationship with one of the creepiest, most repressive nations on earth when we're energy independent. Why are we doing this?
Well, because they trade in the U.S., they trade oil in the U.S. dollar. I mean, if you really want to have a little truth talk about Saudi Arabia,
yes,
it's that we need them selling oil in the U.S. dollar in order to maintain the dominance of the dollar and to be able to make our sanctions effective elsewhere in the world, especially among oil-producing nations.
The petrodollar, Saudi Arabia's oil production, is exchanged in dollars, and that's been underlying the world's economy for decades. But at what cost? The bottom line here is that with evidence that Saudi Arabia's government might have aided in the planning and execution of the 9/11 atrocities, the Saudis could probably rest assured that the interests of the petrodollar system, coupled with the ever-growing grift of the American military-industrial complex, well, that would overwhelm any damning evidence that might negatively impact this long-standing and highly lucrative relationship between the American elite and their Saudi counterparts, all government connected. The only thing standing between plausible and convincing questions and irrevocable conclusion on Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11 rests with the FBI deciding to release the complete truth, all the names. Get rid of these redactions. Meanwhile, as information involving Saudi Arabian government officials has been slowly trickling out into the public, we remain the country's best friend. Now, I've called on the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, to close the Los Angeles Saudi Arabian consulate. This is decades overdue. When countries like Russia and China subvert our country, when they direct actions against our interests, we closed their Seattle and their Houston consulates. There should be no special exemption for Saudi Arabia, especially not just based on the petrodollar. It's now clear that Saudi Arabia harbored and protected some of the most radical clerics who preach the same interpretations of the Quran as the leaders of Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and ISIS. Saudi funding expanded the religious schools around Pakistan, where young men were indoctrinated in these fundamental, violent incarnations of Islam. And in the kingdom, not exactly a human rights mecca. Spousal rape isn't a crime, and they throw gay people off of buildings. So I don't think that closing their consulate in San Diego, in Los Angeles, and any of these places would be the worst thing. Now, the king of Saudi Arabia's official title is the custodian of the two holy mosques. And it seems to me that as custodian, he has a lot of unfinished business to clean up. And the dirtiest place of all may be the Saudi consulate system operating right here in the United States of America. There is another consulate operating in the United States raising disturbing questions, and it relates directly to debunked allegations about me, rooted in an extortion scheme. The DOJ indicted this man, Stephen Alford, under fraud statutes because he worked with others to falsify accusations against me while demanding $25 million to make all my problems go away. The fraud-feasors called this scheme Project Homecoming. Project Homecoming calls on my dad to pay $25 million to a former DOJ official, ostensibly to rescue a Jewish American spy held in Iran named Bob Levinson. Project Homecoming is a criminal fraud scheme. This, according to the DOJ's indictment of Alford. This man, Jake Novak, is the broadcast media director at the Israeli consulate in New York City. Everybody has a day job at the consulate, remember? Jake Novak Israel's main media man in D.C., directly implicates himself in Project Homecoming in texts with political commentator Scott Adams. Philip Nieto wrote a great piece about these exchanges in Spectator World, and we'll post that again on social media. On March 23rd, Novak texts Adams, "Scoop, I can't wait to report. Rep. Gaetz is the subject of a secret grand jury probe of sex with minors and possibly murder conspiracy. I trust the source. Charges apparently very credible." Adams replied to the Israeli official, "I'm betting against it, but the extortion counterclaim sounds credible. Has witnesses, apparently." Here's the implicative part. Novak writes, "The real documents do not extort, and we only asked for $25 million as an estimate at first. We came way down." You don't have to read in between the lines here. Jake Novak was involved in the planning of Project Homecoming. He was apprised in real time as the criminal overture to my father occurred. He was even involved in the pricing of the extortion amount. We came way down? Jake Novak was not a spectator to Project Homecoming. Jake Novak is a media relations professional. Every media outlet in America should be asking him this question: who the hell is we? We asked for $25 million as an estimate at first. We came way down. Is we the government of Israel? I honestly don't know. Are we to believe that a media director for the Israeli Consulate in New York was moonlighting, perhaps, on Project Homecoming? I mean, that's about as likely as al-Bayomi going rogue without direction. Has Novak been contacted by the FBI? Shouldn't the media ask him? What is this official of a foreign government's role in an extortion scheme involving a U.S. congressman? And if the government of Israel isn't involved, and I sure hope they aren't, it would be nice if they would disavow these actions of their media operative. I've always considered myself a friend to Israel. Florida has a unique, close relationship with Israel that I know well and I cherish. The immediate past U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Freeman, is a friend of mine with whom I've worked closely to support the U.S.-Israel relationship. I've traveled to Israel so many times that former Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu once joked with me that he should give me citizenship to shorten my time at Ben Gurion Airport in Jerusalem. I even brought my dad to Israel. They know we are close. While in the Middle East, I traveled to Ramallah with dozens of congressional colleagues to meet with leadership from the Palestinian Authority. After introductory pleasantries, I got the first question of the Palestinian Prime Minister, and I pressed him hard. How many of your schools are named after terrorists? I offered that question with a bit of a scowl. I knew the answer at the time was 38. So I angered the Palestinians in Ramallah so much that my fellow lawmakers made no secret of the fact that when we went back to Jerusalem, they wanted to travel back in a van other than mine. One of the first amendments that I passed as a lawmaker on the House floor banned funding for entities that inculcate hate against Israel in the Arab world.
Mr. Speaker, it does not advance the interests of the United States to fund schools that incite terror and hate throughout the world. 34 of those such schools exist in Judea and Samaria, the area currently controlled by the Palestinian Authority, and this amendment would defund those 34 schools that are named after terrorists, killers, and Nazi collaborators. I'll provide a few examples. Dalal Mughrabi led the Coastal Road Massacre by hijacking a bus. She killed 37 people, including 12 children, and injured another 70. 3 schools are named after her. 2 students attending one of these schools were interviewed on March 27, 2014. They said, "Dalal Mughrabi is a great leader. She walks among us, and I'm personally proud to attend the Dalal Mughrabi school." A second little girl who attended that school said, "My life's ambition is to reach the level of the martyr fighter Dalal Mughrabi." Khalal al-Wazir headed the PLO terrorist organization's military wing. He planned attacks that killed over 125 Israelis. 5 schools are named after him. Salal Khalif led the Black September terrorist organization. He planned the murder of 11 Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics and the murder of 2 American diplomats in the Sudan. 4 schools are named after him. Abdullah Azzam was co-founder of Al-Qaeda, the mentor of Osama bin Laden, known as the father of modern jihad. Abdul-Awal was the head of the Fatah military in the 1960s. A high school for girls carries his name. Amin al-Husseini was a Nazi collaborator. During World War II, he moved to Berlin, where he served as a Hitler associate. In Yugoslavia, he was designated a war criminal. When the Nazis offered to free some Jewish children, al-Husseini prohibited their release, resulting in 5,000 Jewish children being sent to the gas chambers. An elementary school is named after him. Hassan Salem was also a Nazi operative. He was sent by the Nazis during World War II to poison the water supply in British-controlled areas near Tel Aviv. 2 schools are named after him. Mr. Speaker, I care deeply for the education of our youth, but we have to demand that curriculums be reformed so that the schools that American taxpayers fund do not promote hate.
I am a friend to Israel. So why is Jake Novak involved in this extortion scheme against me? If all this is a misunderstanding, Israel should say so. Is it something worse? Maybe Israel has a deep state too. But let's get to the bottom of this. Today, I'm sending this letter to Ambassador Gilad Erdan. That's Israel's ambassador to the United States. I seek his reaction to the news that an agent of his government has implicated himself via text in an extortion scheme against my family. I'm demanding an in-person meeting to discuss this matter urgently, and I will keep you all posted. This is a dynamic, developing story, to say the least. Public figures are hunted by the media daily. We get it, it's the natural order of things. But increasingly in our country, people in the media think that a free press means a press free from criticism. And that's not how it works. They get to hunt us, and we get to, in turn, call out their lies and propaganda and BS. Freedom of speech works both ways. The marketplace of ideas isn't just open for the ideas spewed by activists using media status as some sort of veneer for their political activity. I encountered this dynamic recently, and I want to share it with you. Now, there are liars, damn liars, and journalists, and then there is this person, Tara Dublin. Woof. I mean, that would make a freight train take a dirt road. Tara Dublin is a propagandist. She tweets things like this, and you want to make sure you tune into our Rumble channel so that you can see these on the screen. Now, she learned that I was attending a political event at someone's private home before rallying supporters. So she tweeted her plans. But I don't think she was as disrupted as she had hoped that she would be. The show went on. She posted this video from my rally.
So I am at the Clark County, Washington Fairgrounds. We could not get into the private fundraiser because Matt Gaetz doesn't want to talk to the press. But I am in enemy territory in my own county. Matt Gaetz is going to be here on that very impressive flatbed.
I thought it was kind of funny and tweeted this. Breaking. Karen triggered by flatbed at Gaetz rally with actual humans. You see, I embrace flatbed truck politics without apology. Was my tweet taunting? Yes. It's politics. We don't pitch underhand. And then she sent me this amazing voicemail.
Hi, my name is Tara Dublin, and I am a contributor at HillReporter.com, and I am in Clark County, Washington, where I am a resident, where Matt Gaetz traveled to yesterday in support of Joe Kent, the local Republican challenger to Jamie Herrera Butler, and I had an interview with Joe Kent that Matt Gaetz was supposed to sit in until Matt Gaetz found out I was the person conducting the interview, and then he canceled. And we were led on a wild goose chase to a private fundraiser where we weren't going to be let in. And then we went to the rally where Matt Gaetz's private security detail and Joe Kent's private security detail were incredibly aggressive towards us and intimidating. Matt Gaetz refused to speak to me, but he had no problem retweeting a tweet of mine with a video where I'm speaking. And now Matt Gaetz's followers are swarming me and trolling me and insulting my appearance and calling me butch and a dyke and saying terrible things and threatening me because Matt Gaetz virtue signaled his followers on me, which is a violation of Twitter terms of service. So what I am asking for on this day, September 7th, where I live in Washington State, it is 2:41 in the afternoon. I know he's not going to apologize because he doesn't apologize for anything, but I do want him to delete that tweet. That is going after me like that, going after a private citizen. That is not okay. That is harassment, and that is illegal, and that is a sitting congressman harassing a private citizen, and I will not stand for that. I will sue him if he does not take down that tweet, because this comes into my private life. I was there as a professional person, and he was not. So you tell him to take down that tweet. I will be calling every single office and making the same leaving the same message. I will delete that tweet or I sue you. That's how it goes. Goodbye.
What a lunatic. Her bio does mention that she's a cat lady. I honestly feel sorry for her cats. Needless to say, my tweet isn't coming down, and she isn't going to sue me. But she may think twice before lying about me again, or others. You see, firebrands, we return fire. Thanks so much for watching the show today. Make sure you're subscribed, have notifications turned on, and join us again next Thursday for more Firebrand.